Hi everybody, welcome to Paint Carry Paint. Today we're going to do another portrait, this time using a very limited palette as opposed to the color study we did last time. Today we're essentially using a warmish brown, like a burnt sienna or a transparent red oxide, some ivory black, and white. Essentially that's what this painting is. It's a cool, a warm, plus white. Almost about as simple of a palette as you can use. I do have a little bit of raw umber, which I don't really use that much, to be honest. I'm not even sure why I put it out there. You know, I use it here. I'm using it a little bit here right now in the lights, as I start to sort of mass in the lights over top of that warm brown darkish tone that I'm kind of using as a shadow. So general rule of thumb, the shadows here are going to be warm and the lights are going to be cool, which is why the undertone is that warm brown. And then I will continue to keep my shadows on the warmer side, tapping into the warm brown as much as possible as I add black to push those shadows into sort of the warm temperature zone. And then the lights, as you can see, are much more in the cools. So I'm tapping more into the grays, the blacks, and the whites to really make the lights cool. And I think it's a fun exercise to simplify the palette down as much as possible here to a basic cool and a basic warm plus white, because it really kind of exaggerates and simplifies the duality of, you know, a basic warm and a basic cool, and trying to then use that very limited range as we build our image with our value scale and, you know, our basic temperature shift. I think it can be kind of fun when the sort of like very almost reddish moments of the burnt sienna come through. Almost looks orange, you know, as it sits right next to a very gray color spot, as you can kind of see up there on his cheek, just under the eye. You know, I find that those kind of, that range of pop of color and temperature differences is a fun range to play with. This video is a little bumpy, okay? I tried something a little bit different in making this video and it came out bumpy. So I will definitely remedy that for the next video. I don't want these videos to be so bumpy, but it's, you know, I'm trying to imagine, you know, maybe I'm on a train, you know, painting on a train. I sat down, met this gentleman and asked if I could paint his portrait, and he said, sure. Something to that effect. So here's the titanium white now. Bringing in that titanium white on top of the flake white. Titanium being much more powerful. Can really kick it in the value and the whiteness to a whole other gear. Not that you can't do that also with the flake white, which tends to be softer and warmer. But you just have to use a lot more of the flake white to get a similar effect. Whereas the titanium white is colder, it's more powerful. So in general, rule of thumb, I like to use the flake whites in the beginning of the painting or in the shadows. If I need to put any white in the shadows, I will always use the flake white. And then relying on the titanium white when I want to really kick up the value in a more sort of extreme type of note. This is very much the block-in stage, where I am moving around the portrait, trying to figure out the range of value. I think the range is pretty well established at this point. You can see how much light is on his forehead, and that little dollop of bright white for the highlight on his forehead starting to give me a range in the light mass. And then as the tones come down around the cheek, start getting a little darker, a little more gray, showing me the darker lights and the range of darks as it sort of starts to approach the shadow. I will try to keep my lights a little more opaque, which means you don't see through them, right? You're not seeing through. There's no transparency. And then the shadows is where you're allowed to be a little more transparent. This follows the traditional rules of painting from the old masters. Yeah, I think this is a nice shot right here, because here I can really see the painterly strokes of different values and tones as the modeling occurs across the surface, giving me kind of a nice buttery painterly way of painting. This is really achieved through the wet into wet way of working, where the paint tends to be more painterly. And in looking at the video now, I almost feel like I could have left the painting at this stage. I really kind of am enjoying the painting at this stage. It's still got a lot of brush handling, which is nice to look at. It's like looking at a Van Gogh painting. I don't think Van Gogh is the most technically advanced painter. I know I've said this before, but I do appreciate the charm of his brushstrokes. And so sometimes when I'm painting, especially in alla prima, a one-day painting situation such as this, I try to remember Van Gogh. I remember, how painterly things can be. They don't have to be all rendered and blended. They don't have to. Sometimes you can just block in big chunky strokes like I'm doing up there on the forehead and just leave it. So that's a nice reminder for myself. Yeah, again, I think I will do a couple more of this type of palette where we have just the black, the warm brown, and the white. It's just such a good exercise. We're pretty much taking color out of the equation, so we don't have to deal with color. We are having to deal with temperature, warms and cools. The warm of the warmish reddish brown and the cool of the grays and whites and blacks. So it's a very good exercise in managing not only your values as you model out of the shadows up the lights and towards the highlight, but also the temperature as well. Keeping the lights cool and more opaque, keeping the shadows warm and more transparent. Here's a question: that side plane on the nose, is that shadow or is that light mass? Okay, so this is where yes, I'm working on the hair, and actually probably one of the most fun areas to paint on this portrait is painting his hair. African hair is really fun to paint because it's got some great shapes, and the texture of it is soft, and those are fun qualities. Once you kind of get a believable sense of those qualities to the hair, then it's pretty fun. It's very fun to paint that. Just always good to remember that hair has structure, just like everything else. Hair has angles, structure, planes, light and shadow, modeling, hard edges and soft edges. All of those same rules apply to hair. That way you're building and constructing hair. You're not just, as my teacher would say, don't comb the hair. Don't comb it, right? You want to build the structure. Zooming in now, getting closer to, the features and really, trying to paint the eyes here. You can see how jumpy the video is as we ride the train. and painting this gentleman. I started imagining like what this guy, story he might have been telling me on the train, as I'm painting him. And, I started imagining like, oh, well, he's traveling from Philly, all the way down to like Alabama. And, he left Alabama 25 years ago to head north, in search of a better life or to get away from, whatever was going on in Alabama, whether that be the culture or his family life, etc. And he went up north and got a job and got married. Now he's got 2 kids and one of them is in college, and he's being called back home after 25 years because his mother's sick. And he hasn't been home in 25 years, and he's sitting here riding the train contemplating this life that he had left back in Alabama and the life that he built up north in Philadelphia. And so a lot of the duality of those 2 different worlds as he heads back to a former life, with his family and his brothers and his sisters and all, nieces and nephews that he's never met. And I don't know, I started imagining something kind of like that. So I think the painting is at a very nice stage here. I'm really enjoying seeing the warms and cools of the modeling, the brush handling. And yeah, you've got one day, and that's it. That's the video. It's short and sweet. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to keep making videos. Shooting for one a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, something like that. See you on the next one.